Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Fluency Speaking Hub. I'm Emma, and today we are going to talk about one of the most useful speaking skills you can develop in English: how to tell an interesting story. You may already know a lot of English words, you may understand grammar, and you may even be able to answer questions correctly, but when someone asks you to tell them about something that happened in your life, you suddenly do not know where to begin. Perhaps you start giving too many unnecessary details, perhaps you jump from one event to another, or perhaps your story ends before it has even become interesting. If that sounds familiar, do not worry, because storytelling is not only a natural talent. It is also a skill, and like every other skill, it can be learned and improved through practice.
Exactly, Emma. And I think many English learners believe that they need advanced vocabulary to tell a good story. But that is not really true. A simple story told clearly, with emotion, structure, and a little suspense can be much more interesting than a complicated story filled with difficult words. In fact, when native speakers tell stories in everyday conversations, they often use very common vocabulary. What makes the story engaging is the way they organize it, the way they describe their feelings, the way they create curiosity, and the way they make the listener feel as if they were present when the event happened. So, during this episode, we will show you a simple storytelling structure, useful expressions, common mistakes, and a complete example that you can use as a model for your own speaking practice.
And as you listen, try not to focus only on understanding every single word. Pay attention to how we introduce a story, how we move from one event to another, how we make the listener curious, and how we describe reactions. You can also pause the episode after each section and repeat some of the expressions aloud. By the end of this episode, you should feel more confident about telling stories related to travel, school, work, family, embarrassing moments, surprising experiences, or almost any event from your daily life.
Before we learn how to tell a good story, let us first understand why some stories feel boring. Imagine that a friend asks you, "What did you do yesterday?" You reply, "I woke up, I had breakfast, I went to the market, I bought some vegetables, I came home, and then I watched television." Grammatically, there is nothing seriously wrong with that answer, but it does not create much interest because everything sounds equally important. There is no main event, no emotional reaction, no surprise, and no reason for the listener to ask what happened next.
That is such an important point. Many learners tell stories like a list of actions. First, I did this. Then, I did that. After that, I did something else. The problem is not the use of words like first, then, or after that. Those expressions are useful. The problem is that the speaker does not choose which parts deserve attention. A good storyteller understands that not every detail is important. You do not have to describe every minute of your day. You need to choose one central event and build the story around it. For example, instead of saying, "I went to the market and bought vegetables," you could say, "Yesterday, I went to the market to buy a few ordinary things, but something completely unexpected happened while I was standing near the fruit section." Immediately, the listener becomes curious. What happened? Did you meet someone? Did you lose something? Did an argument begin? Did you see something strange? The story has now opened a question in the listener's mind.
And that question is one of the secrets of storytelling. An interesting story makes the listener want to know what comes next. You do not need to create an unbelievable mystery. You simply need to avoid giving away everything in the first sentence. If you begin by saying, "Yesterday, I lost my wallet at the market, but a kind man returned it," the listener already knows the problem and the ending. However, if you say, "Yesterday, I went to the market for 10 minutes, but I ended up spending the next 2 hours looking for something extremely important," the listener naturally wants to continue listening.
Another reason stories become boring is that the speaker gives too much background information before reaching the main event. You may have heard someone begin a story like this. it happened on a Tuesday, or maybe it was Wednesday. Actually, I think it was Tuesday because my class usually finishes early on Tuesday, although last month our schedule changed, so perhaps it was Thursday. By this point, the listener may already feel tired. The exact day is probably not important. A better beginning would be, a few weeks ago, after finishing my class, I had one of the most embarrassing experiences of my life.
So remember, your goal is not to report every fact. Your goal is to guide the listener through an experience.
Now let us introduce a simple 5-part structure that you can use for almost any story. The 5 parts are the hook, the background, the main event, the reaction, and the ending or lesson.
Let us begin with the hook. The hook is the first sentence or first few sentences of your story. Its job is to catch attention. You can begin with a surprising statement, a question, an emotion, or a hint that something unusual happened. Here are some useful hooks. You will not believe what happened to me yesterday. I had one of the strangest experiences of my life last weekend. Have you ever made a small mistake that turned into a huge problem? I thought it was going to be a normal day, but I was completely wrong. I still feel embarrassed whenever I remember this story.
These expressions are effective because they prepare the listener emotionally. If you say, "I still feel embarrassed whenever I remember this story," the listener knows that an embarrassing event is coming. If you say, "I thought it was going to be a normal day, but I was completely wrong," the listener expects a surprise. The second part is the background. In this section, you explain where you were, who was with you, what you were doing, and what you expected to happen. Keep this part short and relevant. You only need enough information to help the listener understand the situation. For example, last Saturday, I was traveling to another city for an important job interview. I had prepared for several days, and I wanted everything to go perfectly.
The third part is the main event. This is where the problem, surprise, conflict, or unusual experience begins. You can use expressions such as, "Everything was going well until, just as I was about to, suddenly, out of nowhere. That was when I realized. The situation became even worse when." These expressions help you create movement and suspense.
The fourth part is the reaction. This part is often missing from learners' stories, but it is extremely important. Do not only tell us what happened. Tell us how you felt, what you thought, what you said, and how other people reacted. Instead of saying, "I missed the bus," say, "When I saw the bus leaving, my heart dropped. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at it, because I could not believe I had missed it by less than a minute." The event is simple, but the emotional reaction makes it feel real.
And the final part is the ending or lesson. A story should feel complete. Tell the listener how the situation ended, what you learned, or how you feel about it now. You might say, "In the end, everything worked out better than I expected. Looking back, I can laugh about it now. That experience taught me never to leave important things until the last minute. Since that day, I always check my bag twice before leaving home."
So once again, the structure is hook, background, main event, reaction, and ending. You do not need to memorize these words while speaking. With practice, this structure will begin to feel natural.
Let us take a very simple story and improve it step by step. Here is the boring version. Last week, I went to a cafe. I ordered coffee. I sat at a table. Someone took my coffee. Then they gave it back. That story is understandable, but it does not feel interesting. Now let us improve it.
I might tell it like this. Last week, I went to a small cafe near my office because I desperately needed coffee after a long morning. The cafe was crowded, but I finally found an empty table near the window. A few minutes later, the barista called my name, so I collected my drink and placed it on the table. I turned around for only a few seconds to pick up some sugar, but when I looked back, my coffee had disappeared. At first, I thought I had placed it on the wrong table. I looked around, feeling completely confused, and then I noticed a man sitting nearby, calmly drinking from a cup with my name written on it. I did not know whether to laugh or say something, but eventually I walked over and politely told him that I thought he had taken my coffee by mistake. He looked at the cup, saw my name, and immediately became embarrassed. He apologized several times and offered to buy me another one. In the end, we both started laughing, and the cafe gave me a free replacement. It was a small misunderstanding, but it made my stressful morning much more memorable.
Notice what changed. The event itself is still simple. Someone took the wrong coffee. But now we know why Emma was at the cafe, how crowded it was, what she expected, what went wrong, how she felt, what she did, and how the situation ended. The story also includes specific details, such as the name written on the cup and the man calmly drinking the coffee. These details create a picture in the listener's mind.
Specific details are powerful, but you should not include too many. Choose details that support the main event. The fact that the cafe was crowded helps explain how the mistake happened. The fact that the cup had my name on it makes the situation funny. However, the color of the wall, the number of chairs, or the exact price of the coffee would probably not add much to the story.
That is a useful rule. Include details that help the listener see, feel, or understand the event. Remove details that interrupt the story.
Now let us look at some useful expressions for different parts of a story. To introduce the story, you can say, "Something really unusual happened to me recently. I have to tell you about what happened last night. This reminds me of a funny experience I had a few years ago. I was not planning to tell anyone this, but it is too funny to keep secret."
To provide background, you can say, "At the time, I was living in. I had just started. I was on my way to. A friend of mine had invited me to. It was supposed to be a simple trip."
To move the story forward, you can say, "A few minutes later. Not long after that. Meanwhile. Just as we were leaving. Before I had time to react. The next thing I knew."
To create suspense, try expressions such as, "I had no idea what was about to happen. That was when things started to go wrong. I thought the problem was over, but I was mistaken." What happened next surprised everyone. For a moment, everything went completely silent.
And to describe emotions, you can say, "I was absolutely terrified. I felt incredibly relieved. I did not know whether to laugh or cry. I was so embarrassed that I wanted to disappear. My heart was beating so fast. I could not believe what I was seeing. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders."
You can also include direct speech. Direct speech makes a story feel alive. Instead of saying, "The man asked me why I was there," you can say, "He looked at me and said, 'Excuse me, are you waiting for someone?' Instead of saying, 'I told my friend that we had made a mistake,' you can say, 'I turned to my friend and whispered, I think we are in the wrong building.'"
When you use direct speech, you do not need to remember the exact words people said. You can recreate the conversation naturally as long as the meaning remains accurate. Daniel, I think this would be a good time for you to tell us a complete story using the structure we have just explained.
All right. I am going to tell you about a journey that began as a normal train ride and turned into one of the most confusing afternoons I have ever experienced. A few years ago, I was visiting a friend who lived in a town about 2 hours away from my city. I had never been there before, but the journey seemed very simple. I only needed to take one train, get off at the final station, and meet my friend outside the station entrance. I checked the schedule the night before, packed a small bag, and even left home earlier than necessary because I wanted to avoid any problems. When I arrived at the station, everything was going perfectly. I bought my ticket, found the correct platform, and boarded the train with plenty of time. The carriage was almost empty, so I chose a seat near the window, put on my headphones, and started listening to music. I remember feeling very relaxed because I believed the difficult part was over. All I had to do was remain on the train until the last stop. After about an hour, the train stopped at a small station. A few passengers got off, and several new passengers entered. I was not paying much attention because I was looking at my phone. Then an elderly man sat opposite me and asked where I was going. I told him the name of the town, and he gave me a slightly confused look. He asked me to repeat it, so I did. Then he looked out of the window, looked back at me, and said, "I think you are traveling in the wrong direction." At first, I assumed he had misunderstood me. I smiled politely and explained that I had checked the train number carefully. He asked to see my ticket, and after reading it, he pointed to one small word printed near the bottom. I had bought a ticket for the correct destination, but I had boarded a train traveling in the opposite direction. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the ticket. My mind went blank. Then I removed my headphones and looked around as if the correct answer might appear somewhere inside the train. I asked the man what I should do, and he told me to get off at the next station, cross to another platform, and wait for a train going back toward the city. He was very kind, but I could see that he was trying not to laugh. The situation became worse when I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my friend. I called him immediately and tried to explain what had happened. Instead of sounding worried, he started laughing so loudly that I had to move the phone away from my ear. He said, "Daniel, the town is only 2 hours from your house. How have you managed to turn it into an international journey?" Eventually, I got off at the next station. It was a tiny station with no cafe, no waiting room, and almost no people. According to the schedule, the next train in the correct direction would arrive in 45 minutes. I sat on a cold bench, feeling embarrassed and annoyed with myself. I kept replaying the moment when I had confidently boarded the wrong train. About 20 minutes later, the elderly man from the train suddenly appeared on the platform. He had also gotten off because he needed to change trains. He sat beside me and said, "Do not worry. Almost everyone gets on the wrong train at least once. The important thing is to notice before reaching the end of the country." That made me laugh, and we began talking. He told me stories about his travels, his family, and the mistakes he had made when he was younger. By the time my train arrived, I was no longer frustrated. I was actually grateful for the conversation. I finally reached my friend's town almost 3 hours later than planned. He was waiting outside the station, holding a piece of paper with my name on it as if he were collecting a lost passenger from an airport. I wanted to be annoyed, but the situation was too funny. We spent the rest of the weekend joking about my terrible sense of direction. Looking back, that experience taught me 2 things. First, always check the direction of the train, not only the platform number. Second, a mistake does not always ruin your day. Sometimes it creates a better story than the day you originally planned.
That was a great example because the story had a clear beginning, a problem, several reactions, a funny moment, and a lesson at the end. You also used direct speech, which made the characters feel real. I could clearly imagine your friend laughing on the phone and waiting at the station with your name written on a piece of paper.
And notice that I did not use especially difficult vocabulary. Most of the words were simple. The interest came from the sequence of events and the emotional details.
Now let us talk about sounding natural. One mistake English learners sometimes make is trying to use perfect grammar in every sentence while telling a story. They stop frequently, correct themselves, and lose the flow of the story. Accuracy is important, but communication is more important. If you make a small mistake and the listener still understands you, continue speaking.
Yes. Imagine you say, "Yesterday sorry, I went to the library." Correcting yourself once is fine, but if you correct every small mistake, the listener may lose interest. Storytelling needs rhythm. It should feel as if the events are moving forward. A useful strategy is to prepare groups of phrases rather than individual words. For example, "I could not believe what had happened." Before I had time to react. Everything seemed normal at first. That was when I realized. In the end, it all worked out. When you practice these expressions as complete units, they become easier to use naturally.
You should also vary your voice. If every sentence has the same speed and tone, even an exciting story can sound boring. Slow down before an important moment. Pause after a surprising sentence. Speak more quickly when describing confusion or action. Lower your voice when creating suspense. For example, I opened the door slowly, looked inside, and realized that everyone in the room was staring at me. The pauses make the listener wait for the result.
You can also emphasize important words. I was not 10 minutes late. I was 2 hours late. I thought I had lost my phone, but the truth was even more embarrassing. The way you say a sentence can be as important as the words you choose.
Let us now discuss a few common mistakes. The first mistake is starting too far before the main event. Suppose your story is about losing your phone at a restaurant. You do not need to explain everything you did from the moment you woke up. Begin closer to the important moment. Instead of saying, "I woke up at 7, took a shower, had breakfast, answered some messages, and then decided to meet my friend," you could say, "Last Friday, I met a friend for lunch, and halfway through the meal, I realized my phone was missing."
The second mistake is adding too many characters. If several people were involved, use names only when necessary. The listener does not need to remember your friend's brother's neighbor's cousin unless that person plays an important role. The third mistake is repeating the same transition. Some learners say, "and then," in every sentence. I entered the room, and then I sat down, and then the teacher arrived, and then she asked a question, and then everyone looked at me. Try using different transitions. I entered the room and sat down. A few moments later, the teacher arrived. As soon as she asked the first question, everyone turned and looked at me.
The fourth mistake is forgetting the listener. Storytelling is a conversation, not a speech. Look at the listener's reaction. You can involve them by saying, "Can you imagine how embarrassed I felt? Guess what happened next?" You probably think the problem ended there, but it did not. These phrases create a connection.
The fifth mistake is ending too suddenly. A story needs a final sentence that gives the listener a sense of completion. Do not simply say, "So yes, that happened. Tell us what happened afterward or what you learned. Emma, now it is your turn. Can you tell us an embarrassing story?"
Of course, although I still feel slightly uncomfortable whenever I remember it. This happened when I had just started working at a new company. I had only been there for about 2 weeks, so I was still trying to remember everyone's names, understand the office rules, and make a good impression. One morning, my manager told me that an important client would be visiting the office. She asked me to prepare some documents and bring them to the meeting room at 10 o'clock. I wanted to show that I was responsible, so I prepared everything early. At about 5 minutes before 10, I picked up the documents, checked them twice, and walked confidently toward the meeting room. The door was closed, but I could hear people talking inside. I assumed the meeting had already started, so I quietly opened the door and entered. The room suddenly became silent. There were about 12 people sitting around a large table, and every single person turned to look at me. I smiled, walked toward the front of the room, and placed the documents in front of the man who appeared to be leading the meeting. He looked at the papers, looked at me, and said, "Thank you, but I do not think these are for us." I felt confused and explained that my manager had asked me to deliver them for the client meeting. A woman sitting near the window raised her hand and said, "I think the client meeting is in the room next door." At that moment, I realized I had entered a completely different company's meeting. Our office shared the floor with another business, and I had walked through the wrong door without noticing the company name written on the glass. I wanted to disappear. I apologized, collected the documents as quickly as possible, and moved toward the door. Unfortunately, because I was so nervous, I pushed the door even though it needed to be pulled. I pushed it once, then again, while everyone watched. Finally, someone said gently, "You have to pull it." When I eventually escaped from the room, I stood in the hallway for a few seconds, trying to recover. Then I heard laughter behind the door. I could not blame them because the whole situation was ridiculous. I entered the correct meeting room about 2 minutes later. My manager asked why my face was so red, but I simply said I had gone to the wrong room. Later that afternoon, one of my colleagues told me that everyone in the neighboring company had heard about the new employee who had delivered documents to the wrong meeting and then failed to open the door. For the next few weeks, whenever I walked past that office, people smiled at me. At first, I felt embarrassed, but eventually I started smiling back. A few months later, I became friends with one of the people who had been in that meeting, and she told me that my unexpected entrance had been the most entertaining part of their entire day. The experience taught me that embarrassing moments usually feel much bigger to us than they appear to other people. At the time, I thought I had destroyed my professional reputation, but in reality, it was only a harmless mistake, and most people forgot about it quickly.
That was painful and funny at the same time. The part about pushing the door made the story even better because the listener thinks the embarrassment is over. But then another problem happens.
Exactly. Sometimes a story becomes more interesting when the problem gets worse before it gets better. You can use expressions like, "as if that was not bad enough," or, "I thought the embarrassing moment was over, but then."
Now we want you to practice. Think of one real event from your life. It does not need to be dramatic. You can choose a time when you got lost, missed an appointment, met someone interesting, made a mistake, received good news, helped someone, or experienced something unexpected. Use these 5 questions. What is the most interesting sentence I can use to begin? Where was I? And what was I doing? What unexpected event happened? How did I react? How did the story end? And what did I learn?
Let us create a short example together. Imagine the event is missing an important online meeting. The hook could be, "I once missed an important meeting even though I was sitting in front of my computer the entire time." The background could be, "It was my first online meeting with a new team, and I wanted to appear professional." The main event could be, "I joined the meeting link, but after waiting for 20 minutes, I realized I had joined the meeting scheduled for the following week." The reaction could be, "My stomach dropped when I saw messages from my manager asking where I was." The ending could be, "I joined the correct meeting, apologized, and learned to check both the link and the date before every online appointment."
That simple framework turns a common mistake into a complete story.
Now we will give you several sentences. Listen first, then pause and repeat them aloud. "I thought it was going to be a normal day, but I was completely wrong.
Everything was going well until I noticed something strange."
Before I had time to react, the situation became even more confusing.
I did not know whether to laugh, cry, or simply walk away.
For a few seconds, I could not believe what I was seeing.
In the end, everything worked out, but I learned an important lesson.
Looking back, the experience was embarrassing, but it gave me a great story to tell.
You do not need a speaking partner to practice storytelling. One effective exercise is to choose one photograph from your phone. Look at the picture and describe what happened before, during, and after it was taken. Explain who was present, what you were doing, how you felt, and why the moment was memorable.
Another useful method is to record yourself. Choose a simple event and speak for 2 minutes without stopping. Do not write every sentence in advance. Only write 5 keywords related to the structure: hook, background, event, reaction, ending. After recording, listen to yourself and ask a few questions. Did I reach the main event quickly? Did I repeat the same words too often? Did I explain how I felt? Did my story have a clear ending?
You can also tell the same story 3 times. The first time, tell it in 30 seconds. The second time, tell it in 2 minutes. The third time, tell it in 5 minutes. This teaches you how to add or remove details depending on the situation.
That is especially useful because in real conversations, you do not always have the same amount of time. Sometimes someone wants a quick explanation. At other times, they are interested and ask more questions. A flexible storyteller can make the story shorter or longer without losing the main point.
Here is your challenge for today. Think of a moment when something did not go according to plan. Perhaps you missed a bus, forgot someone's birthday, went to the wrong place, lost an item, cooked something badly, or misunderstood a message. Begin with this sentence. I thought everything was under control, but then. Continue the story using the 5-part structure. Try to speak for at least 2 minutes. Use one expression for suspense, one sentence describing your emotions, and one direct quotation.
For example, I thought everything was under control, but then I realized I had sent the message to the wrong person. From there, explain who the message was intended for, who received it, what the message said, how you reacted, and what happened in the end. Do not worry about making the story perfect. Your first goal is to keep speaking and organize your ideas clearly.
Let us review the main lessons from today's episode. A good story does not require advanced vocabulary or an extraordinary event. It needs a clear structure, relevant details, emotional reactions, and a satisfying ending. Begin with a hook, give only the necessary background, introduce the main event, describe how you reacted, and finish by explaining the result or lesson.
Remember that storytelling improves through repetition. The more often you tell stories, the easier it becomes to choose the right details, connect your ideas, and speak with confidence. Start with small everyday experiences. You do not need to wait until something dramatic happens. A missed train, a surprising conversation, an embarrassing mistake, or a kind action from a stranger can all become interesting stories when you tell them well.
And the next time someone asks, "How was your weekend?" do not simply say, "It was good." Give them a story. You might say, "It was good, but something very unexpected happened on Saturday." That one sentence can open the door to a natural and memorable conversation.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and remember that every experience in your life can become a story.
We will see you in the next episode.
Until then, take care and keep telling your stories in English.
Goodbye.